Okay, so what does that do to the follicle? Now the follicle, now that's spent, the cartridge is spent, there's nothing, no ovum in it, it changes to something called the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum, I'll show in yellow. So yeah, this corpus luteum, it no longer has that. So all the granulosa cells, after this follicle is ruptured, they change their behavior. So ovulation is a major event, and what happens is like that estrogen production drops off. Now it doesn't reach zero. That's incorrect, but it does drop off and rebound a bit. Because why? Even though it's no longer the follicle no longer has an egg, it still produces estrogen. It still has granulosa cells. All right, so FSH drops, rebounds a bit, but this starts to depress it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, rewind that a bit. Let's not talk about the luteal phase yet. So what causes that ovulation? Well, funny thing is, and again, there's multiple theories, and the more commonly taught theory is that there's positive feedback in the follicular phase between estrogens and LH. So high levels of estrogens. So again, this is our E2 and other estrogens. And this causes a surge. So we're showing luteinizing hormone. And this causes a spike. And then it just drops off. So this luteinizing hormone this triggers the ovulation, right? Okay, so the funny thing, now we don't have the granulosa cells acting like they do before in ovulation. Now we're in the luteal phase we see here. So what happens? Well, the thing is that your granulosa cells, when during the follicular phase, they do produce some progesterone, but not that much. But once ovulation occurs, this becomes the primary hormone that granulosa cells secrete. So what's happening here is now you have an increase in progesterone. So this is what we have here. Now the funny thing is that this progesterone is kept intact. Or it reaches a peak here. Sorry. So this is the corpus luteum. It starts to mature. And then it becomes a paler version. Called the corpus albicans. Let's see if we can make it a little. Yeah, so the corpus albicans is that final structure. So once it becomes that spent corpus luteum, now it's a corpus albicans. Levels of both progesterone and estradiol drop. Now let's talk about progesterone. So the thing is that progesterone, there's actually a lot in the name. So yes, it is produced by granulosa cells, but the key word here, gestation. So that means carrying an embryo and fetus in the womb until birth. So progesterone promotes gestation. Now look at the timing of this. When you see the timing, you have ovulation here. So now this egg is traveling the fallopian tubes hoping to get fertilized. Now, what progesterone also does is builds up and maintains the endometrium. And the endometrium is where you hope the embryo implants so you have a safe pregnancy. So it kind of makes sense. You have ovulation, now this egg is traveling down the fallopian tubes. So what are you going to do? Well, you want to have a landing pad. You want to have some, say it's a lot of endometrium, so you can catch this fertilized egg and then also have it safely implant in the endometrium. So this is why this order is very important. If the egg isn't deployed yet, so if you're still here in the follicular phase, does it make sense to build it before? I mean, it does take energy, it does take nutrients to keep that endometrium. But what are you doing here? When you're at this phase, remember the egg is now traveling, so you're preparing a safe landing pad, kind of like a crash pad or a landing mat for this baby or this embryo to implant in. So yes, it's not coincidental that you have this progesterone increasing after ovulation. It's really cool like that. But the thing is that why do you have the shedding down here? So as you lose progesterone, what happens? Well, then the endometrial lining sheds, and then what happens the next month? Well, you just generate a new endometrial functional layer. So the other thing is like it's not just like so another analogy or metaphor is like changing the bed sheets. So every time there's a new egg release, you're putting out a new soft bed for the hopefully, or if it is fertilized, you have a new endometrium, a new fresh endometrium for this embryo to implant in.